Welcome into the 615 Sessions podcast on this Friday afternoon, September the 6th. It is a game week, and we couldn't be more excited to head up to Chicago. If you're hearing this or watching this live, it's Friday afternoon. Tomorrow, I'll be on my way up to the Windy City to see the Titans take on the Chicago Bears in the 2024 season opener for both of those teams. We had NFL football last night. And you saw what happened to the Baltimore Ravens. The difference between the Ravens and the Chiefs, as far as I could tell, is one has Mahomes and the other doesn't. And that is a tough test for any team in the AFC. But that's the landscape of the AFC. And that's where the Titans are trying to get to that level of competitiveness where those two teams competing at the top of the heap will be vying for a Super Bowl. Now, will the Titans be vying for a Super Bowl in 2024? Odds are not in their favor, but it is worth talking about how big a test this first game is for Will Levis and the Titans offense to pass, and that's exactly what we are going to do here today. Of course, the 615 Sessions podcast is presented by Zen Sports. Plug in the promo code ATOZTN. Whether you're betting college football or pro football, Zen Sports is the place where betting just gets better. Go to zensports.com for more information. Terms and conditions do apply. Must be 21 plus and in the state of Tennessee to bet. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789 at Zen Sports. Okay, so this game is a fascinating matchup. It is one of the more interesting Week 1 games on the board, and there are plenty of interesting Week 1 games on the board. Think about this. In Week 1, not only are you getting the best game of the week as the first game of the season, Ravens and Chiefs, indisputably, it lived up to the hype. It's rare that a Week 1 NFL kickoff game. I know the last year with the Detroit Lions going to Arrowhead and winning against the Chiefs was also a fun game, but it was fun for different reasons. Both teams showed some Week 1 rust. Both teams are good enough to keep themselves in that game. And, of course, the Derrick Henry factor was interesting to watch from afar for the first time if you are a Titans fan, taking in what it is to experience the Derrick Henry experience without having to root for it, which I imagine for some of you was a pleasant experience. But we're not here to talk about Derrick Henry and his new home. We're here to talk about your team and how they are going to try and get a win on the road in this big Week 1 game. So we're going to go through a couple of different things together here on the 615 Sessions podcast. And the place to start is the matchup to watch. So what is the biggest matchup to watch in this particular game? There's a couple of different things that you could pull from. But the correct answer, the most important answer, or the biggest matchup on the board that will ultimately decide who leaves happy and who leaves a loser is going to be the new Titans offense with Brian Callahan and Will Levis versus Matt Eberflus and his defense, one of the most successful defenses in football last year, and a defense that led the league in turnovers, which they are absolutely going to try to do again and start by trying to get a hold of Will Levis and make his life a living hell. Now, there's a couple of different things that will determine whether or not they are able to make this happen. So first, if we're going to understand the kind of things that the Titans are going to have to do to win this game, you have to understand the Bears defense. And I'm not smart enough to break the Bears defense down for you, but the person that I have at my disposal that always helps with these things is Greg Cosell of NFL Films. So we spent a good deal of our podcast. The podcast, if you're unfamiliar, is called The Install with Greg Cosell. And we break down the best and most important matchups each and every week for the Titans and also for the NFL. So with everything that's going on with the Tennessee Titans, you have to take a couple of things into consideration and things that we've talked about before on the radio show or the primetime show, but it's important to reiterate here. Week 1 is a liar, right? Week 1 is the most unpredictable of any of the results that you will see at any given point throughout a season of unpredictability in the NFL. This is always the case, but there are some things that can be determined in Week 1 and some ways that you can go about making sure that you're in the best possible position to succeed. If you're one of these teams that's walking in against a handful of unknowns in an opponent, like the Titans will be doing against the Chicago Bears. Now, the same could be said of the Bears hosting the Titans. This is a very different team from the Tennessee Titans of the last 2 seasons, really a very different team of the Tennessee Titans of, I don't know, since Mike Mularkey was the head coach. This is as big a philosophical shift as they have had since Ken Wisenhunt tried to come in here and form a passing offense in his image, which ultimately and famously we know did not go the way of Ken Wisenhunt or the Tennessee Titans. But this is Brian Callahan. This is not Derrick Henry in this offense. This is going to be what the Cincinnati Bengals run. You're a carbon copy of them, even down to this year's roster, where I had a person in the Titans organization text me and say, you know what's interesting? You know who else kept 5 tight ends on their active roster this year on their 53? The Cincinnati Bengals. What did the Titans do? They kept 5 tight ends on their active roster. The Titans brought over the Bengals slot receiver to play in the Bengals offense with the former Bengals offensive coordinator. There's a bunch of Bengals ties all over the place, which is great if you're the Titans, because you're looking at this and saying, well, if I'm going to compete in the AFC, I have to have a more balanced and efficient offense. It's not just about the passing game. In fact, this game to me is very little about the passing game. And I'll explain why here in just a second. But with everything that you're going to be taking in, everything that you're going to be processing, everything that you're going to be watching play out in front of you, the most important thing, I think, in this particular game is going to be this new Titans offense against this Bears defense. So first, let's understand the Bears, courtesy of Greg Cosell. This Bears Week 1 matchup. So in particular, this Matt Eberflus defense, and as you mentioned, Jalen Johnson, who got paid in the offseason, Montez Sweat, who was an in-season acquisition last year, who helped fortify one of the better defensive fronts in football a year ago. What is conceptually, what is Matt Eberflus running, and what are some kind of tendencies that you've observed from his defense over the course of time?
Well, they're a 4-man D-line front defense in both base and sub. And in their sub defense, they're high percentage nickel. They only played 30 snaps a year ago of dime, so they do not want to take their 2 linebackers off the field, Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. Both very good players. They both stand out on tape. They're very active players. They're not a high percentage blitz defense, although their blitz percentage does increase on 3rd down, as many teams do. They use both linebackers, Edmonds and Edwards, as part of pressure packages. They also use their slot corner in nickel, Gordon. He's a very, very good player. They use him as a blitzer as well. He comes from the University of Washington. He played opposite Trenton McDuffie, who many will know because he's with the Chiefs. And Gordon, just like McDuffie, is physical, competitive. He's really good in the slot. But their 2 outside corners are very good too. You mentioned Jalen Johnson getting his money. He predominantly plays to the field. They play Tyreek Stevenson, who was a rookie a year ago, who I loved coming out of the University of Miami. He's the other corner. He predominantly plays the boundary corner. He's very physical, both as a run defender and can play press. This is a team that plays a lot of zone for the most part, but then on 3rd down, they'll play a lot of man. I've spoken to offensive coaches who say that Matt Eberflus, who's their head coach, and essentially it's his defense, that on 1st and 2nd down, you kind of know what you're getting, but on 3rd down, they're not very predictable and they present some problems.
And certainly so that is a snippet of the Bears-Titans preview that Greg Cosell and I did on Wednesday, and it's available in your favorite podcast feed. It's called The Install with Greg Cosell. Simple as that. So how do you attack a defense as Greg just described it? A defense that's going to keep the numbers advantage in coverage, a defense that's going to play primarily zone and then get man heavy on 3rd downs, and a defense that is going to get pressure with 4 because they have great players like Montez Sweat. Now, Montez Sweat is officially questionable, as is Keenan Allen for the game. The expectation in Chicago is that both of those players are going to play, whereas for the Titans, and I have the injury report for Tennessee here in front of me. It came down about 1:30 today. Only 4 players listed on the injury report, but 2 of them are of great consequence here. You have Chidobe Awuzie, who is questionable and was a limited participant in practice dealing with that calf injury. He, of course, is one of your starting outside corners, and he missed the entirety of training camp with that calf injury. Now, he had no injury designation the first 2 days, and in fact, this is the first day that he appeared on the injury report. So perhaps that's just, trying to play some mind games with the Bears, perhaps that is legitimate, and we will see what ultimately the determination they make on Chidobe Awuzie is come Sunday. And then there's DeAndre Hopkins, who continues to miss time with this knee strain, this MCL tear that he's got. My expectation, for what it's worth, is that I don't expect DeAndre Hopkins to play on Sunday. In fact, I would be surprised. Now, something could change. Perhaps they feel better about his status than the MCL tear would indicate. He's had considerable time to rest it, to rehab, to continue to try and recover and get ready. But my inclination, based on what I've heard for the better part of a month at this point, is that they expect this DeAndre Hopkins injury to bleed into the season, or at least the recovery period to bleed into the season, as they try and get him 100% right. We've talked about this before. He's 32 years old. You want to manage him as best you can, and that would be their preference. They don't desperately need him. Of course, he would make them better, but you need the best version of DeAndre Hopkins that you can have. And right now, it is fair to expect, as he continues to deal with this, by the way, he practiced all 3 days this week, which is not inconsequential and may lead them to feel more optimistic about this than they did perhaps on Wednesday. But it's a management type of situation now. It will probably be a management type of situation throughout the course of the season. And the best way to hedge your bets against managing it for basically the entire year is to try and get him as healthy as humanly possible before you end up putting him out there. So Treylon Burks is going to be relied upon if DeAndre Hopkins cannot go. Again, my expectation, he's not officially out. He's ruled as questionable. But my expectation is I would again be surprised to see DeAndre Hopkins out there in week 1. Now, for that part of things, DeAndre Hopkins is something that we will get to here in just a second. A reminder that the podcast is made possible by Zen Sports. Promo code ATOZTN is how you bet on all the football action this weekend. Make sure you use that promo code to get up to $100 on your no danger first wager. So Hopkins in the knee, worth paying attention to. This was Hopkins in the locker room yesterday after his second day of practice. Ultimately, he would practice all 3 days this week.
I feel good, man. Hold on. Go ahead.
Feel like you're on track to go Sunday?
I feel great. We'll see Sunday.
Is it just a pain tolerance thing at this point, just kind of dealing with that?
Football players, we got a lot of pain all the time, so I don't know who's not in pain playing football.
Sure. But this early in the season, is it frustrating to you to kind of starting out this way, starting out with the injury in camp? How tough has that been?
It's not frustrating at all. I've been playing for 12 years, dealt with a lot of things that held me back, from starting. So, man, it's just another day, another game.
If you do get a chance to get out there Sunday, I mean, they got some good corners over there. Jalen Johnson, what do you know about his game, and how much more do you get excited to know, hey, I might be going up against one of the top corners in the game?
Jalen's obviously one of the best doing it. Played against him a couple years ago in Arizona. Just watching him on film, his game has definitely improved since then, which is why, he's deserving of the contract that he's gotten. So, he's got to be ready. 2 good cornerbacks over there.
Obviously, a ton of changes for this offense this year. Just how comfortable are you? How confident are you?
You can turn the music down. You want to tell them. Hey, y'all hit the music right quick. Hit the music.
Appreciate that. So, yeah, how confident are you in everything that you guys have done offensively to kind of turn things around, change things here?
Oh man, it's football. You gotta roll with what you have, and Callahan has done a great job of getting us prepared, especially in this offense. New offense doesn't matter, man. We're professional athletes, so it's our job to go out and execute.
You know the answer here.
So that is DeAndre Hopkins speaking in the locker room with media yesterday. With all that being said, he is questionable. There is the potential. They're calling it a game time decision. My educated guess is that DeAndre Hopkins does not play, even in a limited capacity. But we will wait to see on Sunday and find out. I'll have more updates for you from Chicago on Titans Radio when we are doing the Lee Company Countdown to Kickoff from 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. on 104.5 The Zone. And then, of course, I'll be a part of the Titans Radio pregame broadcast at 11:45 is when Jim Wyatt and I are scheduled to do our hit with Rhett Bryan in the Titans radio booth. So we'll have more information for you as things continue to roll along. So with all that being said, put up or shut up time for Treylon Burks if Hopkins cannot go. And that is something to keep an eye on here. And that will, of course, impact Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, though, as I've said multiple times since this Hopkins thing started, since the injury discussion started, if you spent this much money on your wide receiver core and you're still desperately pining for DeAndre Hopkins, then you didn't spend your money the correct way. A lot of people are going to have to step up, but none more so than Treylon Burks. That will be a critical part of this. All right, so let's wrap things up with season expectations. I told you guys I was going to give you expectations. I don't do picks, but I'll give you season expectations. And I'll tell you that I would probably be inclined to bet on you. I don't bet on NFL games. You know this as a reporter. It's a conflict of interest. But if I was betting with your money, I might be inclined to take the Titans on the money line. I think this is a game that is imminently winnable. Now, for the season, that becomes a little more complicated. And I went back and forth on this, and I tried not to let the fact that I only cover, right, on a day-to-day basis, one team. And sometimes that can influence you positively because you know more, because you see everything every day, because you talk to people every day about it. And it's all consuming. And it also can impact my opinion negatively because I can get caught up in seeing too much of one thing versus everything else within the division or within the conference. And sometimes that can skew your perspective. So I really had a hard time trying to figure out what I thought the Titans were going to be capable of doing this year. And I can't wait for the expectations for you guys to run back in my face as soon as something goes differently than the way that I expect it to go. That's why they're expectations, not picks. But I think that this is a 7-10 football team. I think that we're ultimately talking about the third best team in the AFC South, and I think that we'll see that play out throughout the course of the season. Now, of course, the variable that none of these teams can account for, especially at the start of the season, because your roster looks much different by the time you get to week 10, week 15, week 18, than it does on September the 8th when most teams will kick off. Of course, there is the Friday night game between the Eagles and the Packers tonight. Packers, by the way, on the Titans schedule in the not so distant future. But it's a 7-10 football team from my perspective. I think that the Texans and the Jags are clearly and obviously better. I can't say that the Colts are clearly and obviously better, even though I think that Richardson has the highest upside of any of the quarterbacks in this division. I would pick the Colts to finish fourth and the Texans and Jags 1 and 2, with the Titans coming in third. I only think that one team out of the AFC South is going to end up in the playoffs this year, but of course, that remains to be seen, and that's why they play the games. But the AFC continues to be stacked, and I think there's just only going to be there's only going to be room for one team out of this particular division, and so winning the division is going to, of course, be a priority for any team competing in the NFL to try and secure home field advantage for at least a game and try and make the playoffs as easy on you as humanly possible. But, it's kind of like the Colts. I don't know what Richardson is, so I can't in good conscience say that the Colts are going to be better than any of these other three teams, where Trevor Lawrence is still, until such time as C.J. Stroud passes him, Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in the division. C.J. Stroud may end up being the best quarterback in the division in the future, but right now it's Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor Lawrence and Stroud are 1 and 2. Levis is more of a known commodity than is Anthony Richardson, but, I think for all the same reasons that we've talked about a million times over, there's no evidence to be completely sold on Will Levis yet. Now, I've talked about this before many times. I'd buy low on Will Levis because I do think that they've set him up well, but the decision-making, the accuracy, the pocket presence, and all the different mechanical stuff that they've tried to fine-tune is something that we have yet to see play out in a game. So going into the season, 7-10 feels right. We'll see how much better or worse they ultimately fare. But there's no question that Will Levis knows he's not a proven commodity either, which is something that we talked about with him when he was on the radio show, 2 weeks ago.
What's wrong? You always have that motivation, right? However you describe the chip on your shoulder and whatever that may be from player to player and stuff like that. But for you in particular, it felt like you bought yourself a ton of goodwill with the way that you were able to debut against the Falcons and how great you guys were as a team on that day. And, maybe the Oilers uniforms have something to do with it. There's a little bit of poetry to that in and of itself. But it seems like, that was very quickly put aside from the vast majority of the fans who might have doubted you at that point, and it feels like you have a lot of that buy-in already prior to accomplishing what you ultimately set out to accomplish.
For sure, yeah. I think that first game definitely helped, and that was very special. I wish that I can have a lot more performances like that, so people don't remember that game as much. Just to think that a lot of people keep pointing back to my first game when I played a bunch more games after that. I'm due for another one like that, and to keep pushing myself to performing to the level where I know I can. So, I know we got the guys to do it this year. I got confidence in myself, and just got to keep working and keep trying to reach those heights, like I said, that we're.
So that's part of the Will Levis interview, and you can go check that out if you want to watch the entirety of it on 104.5 The Zone's YouTube channel. Jack Tripper says, is this really live or pre-recorded? It's live. I do this at 5 sessions live. I don't have time to pre-record.
Why would we do that if this was recorded?
I hate him so much. So yes, those are my season expectations. I'm heading up to Chicago. My laptop's about to die, so we have to end this godforsaken podcast mercifully so I can get on with my day. B-Bird says that's how he feels after last night talking about Bert. Yes, an unfortunate.
All right, we're ending the show. Thanks, everybody, coming out. Lead Company countdown to kickoff starts at 9. Titans Radio takes over at 10. Rhett Bryan, Coach Mac, Mike Keith, the whole Titans Radio gang.
11.
7.
11.
11. You're on at 11:45 though. With Jim Wyatt. Everybody appreciate it. Can't wait for football to finally start tonight. Kickoff in Brazil. Packers, Eagles. Can't wait for the Ravens Week 1 game to start against the Raiders in Baltimore. I will be there eating pounds of Jimmy seafood. We can't wait. Now everyone scream and laugh at this child who gets abducted by a kite.